This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists to entertain and to inform.
Behind the scenes at the Poor Historians podcast studio.
Oh, hey, Aaron. What's up? Whoa. What is all this? Did I just walk into something illegal?
No. I mean, I know how this looks.
It looks super illegal. Are you making pills?
Well, yes, but it's not what you think. These aren't drugs.
They do look like drugs, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess pills do technically look like drugs, but these aren't drug pills.
I'm confused.
They're placebos. There's no active ingredients in them. They're just sugar pills.
There are thousands of them here on the desk. What's that thing?
Oh, well, that's a pill press. That's how I'm making these. You see, you put some sugar here and then you just go.
Oh, okay. I get it. Why are you doing this?
Oh, well, this week's episode is about placebos or the placebo effect or both. I don't know.
So you made placebos. I guess that makes sense, sort of.
Well, I'll have you know, this is the next big thing in our merchandise lineup. Yeah, Poor Historians podcast placebos. We'll put our logo on the bottle. We can put them in the merch page. It's going to be a hit.
I think Max is going to hate it.
Well, we can wait and see.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. All right, let's get this show started. Aaron, are you doing a crime?
He made a bunch of placebos to sell as Poor Historians merchandise.
You made fake pills to sell in merchandise to our fans?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did.
That's a great idea.
What?
Oh, really?
No, it's bad. It's really bad.
Oh.
Aw, great. Now we just have a bunch of dumb fake pills to get rid of.
Doesn't look like Dr. Mike is here, so why don't you just put them all on his desk or something?
Oh, okay. Hey, where is Dr. Mike anyway?
Good question.
I'm in here.
Wait. Mike, did you trap yourself in the annals of medical history?
Not exactly.
Oh, I put him in there.
Wait, why?
He made fun of my dog Ebenezer.
You locked him in the vault for that? What did he say?
He called him Ebenezer and then said,
Okay, I think we know
think-
what he said.
yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Let's start the show.
We have to let Dr. Mike out.
Do we?
Yes.
Fine.
Okay, now let's start the show. Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, a podcast misadventuring into the archives of medical history and beyond. I'm Dr. Max, and I am joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Dr. Aaron.
Hola, me llamo Aaron.
And Dr. Mike.
Ciao, Bella.
You had to meet him where he was, I get it.
Yeah, different language, whatever.
As well as our medical history intern, Alba.
Yeah.
Whoa, love the energy. Alba, I did not write anything clever after your introduction. I hope you are not offended.
No.
Okay. Have you stopped fighting with Mike as you let him out of the vault?
You know, I have a new appreciation for Mike's jokes. My feelings were hurt because he decided to because he decided to make fun of Neezy specifically. But to be fair, his D's nuts jokes are still pretty funny.
Yeah,
There you go. You heard it
they're
here
almost
first.
classy, but they're not.
Yeah, my judgment was clouded. You know, it was because it was personal.
I understand the white hot rage that comes with making fun of your dog.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
He's a good boy. Not Dr. Mike, but the dog.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you guys were talking about me.
Mike could use some work.
Speaking of the bestest boys and girls, I guess. If you we'd like to take a second to thank our patrons. So if you appreciate our humble little show and want to count yourself among the super fans, we invite you to check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Poor Historians Podcast, or go to the link in the show notes. If you do that, you get access to episodes early. There's an occasional bonus episode, and you get to kind of converse with us over there on that page. And also, Alba will give you an in-character thank you of somebody of our choosing, or maybe you're choosing. Maybe we should have a new patron say, I want Alba's thank you to be this person. Let's do that. All right, just came up with that right now.
Sounds fun.
All right, so there you go. But either way, we do thank our patrons for helping make the show go. Next up, let's talk about some non-medical opinions, though. All right, we have another non-medical opinion. This is the part of the show where we, since we do not give out medical advice, try to give one of our listeners and fans a non-medical opinion on a subject of their choosing. And so this week, I believe we have another asker. What do we got, Alba?
We do. This week's asker is Charles. Charles asks, what is the best way to stay motivated while doing an optional but difficult project?
I read that as kind of like a hobby project sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how it was intended, but that's kind of how I read it. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think you tell everyone you know about the goal that way, or about the thing that you're doing.
Ooh.
That way you're accountable because people keep asking you about it. 3.5 years into trying to do a pull-up, your friends keep saying, hey, Alba, how's that pull-up coming along? And you just still haven't quit yet because you told so many people you were going to do it.
It's a good
So
one.
like self-shaming through the expectations that you set
Yeah.
through others that you tell. Yeah, that's a really good adaptive
And I can do
strategy.
a chin-up now, just not
That's-
a pull-up.
Well, that's
3.5
pretty,
years in, yeah.
pretty damn good though. Seriously.
Thanks.
That is good. I mean, the other way is you could do it privately in a journal, and then you could just sort of gradually yell at yourself in the journal and not do the goal.
Mhm.
And then as you go along, you just sort of build a diary full of, admonishments for yourself.
What if your goal is to journal more?
Well, then you can yell at yourself about how your last journal entry was too far from the one before
But
that.
then you
I
finished
mean,
your goal.
It's exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that way. You journal about how you don't want to journal or about how you want to journal. Boom, you did it.
That got way more meta than I would have thought.
Mm.
Well, as a person with 3+ years of podcasting experience, I'd say forming an unhealthy obsession with whatever it is that you're working on is probably the way to go. Just let that project take up like 90% of your brain at all times, and you'll probably end up just seeing it through so you can try to relax at some point. That's just how I go about things. I don't know about you, but no, Mike, what do you do?
Well, I read this as like house projects, and I just thought, like, if there's something that you want to do but it's optional, you just don't do it until it's necessary, and then you have to do
That's
it,
good.
and then
Yeah.
still don't
wait
do it.
until it's not optional.
Yeah. Only then take care of it if it becomes a huge problem, and then maybe
Oh,
don't
that's
do
like
it.
my garage. Like, yeah, I should have torn it down like 5 years ago, and then the gutter fell off, and I'm like, well, now I really should do something. But really, I could just like tag it back up there,
Mhm.
and now it's optional again,
Yep.
and then I can just do that
Mm.
again.
But
there will come a
day where you
Poor
have to do the
historians
garage.
gathering should just be us taking apart your garage.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
Just bring over a
Yeah,
bunch
blast.
of sledgehammers. It'd be
I
fun,
could do
man.
demo.
Can we just burn
Hell
it
yeah.
down?
Ooh.
Probably. I
Yeah.
think that the
Do you need a permit for that?
There's no law against it, is there?
Well, you can hire.
Isn't that
Burning
arson?
down.
I don't think you can burn down
if you're-
structures.
You
Unless you're
can, yeah. You
blessing
can
the
hire a
project.
fire department to do it.
Well, that's got to
Oh,
be part of
really?
the
Yeah.
permit, though, if you get the fire department
Yeah, but
involved.
that's Then they get
You're doing it
experience
aboard.
managing a blaze.
I know deep in my
Mm.
heart that somewhere in all of that was a healthy non-medical opinion that Charles can take.
Burn your
and
house
do
down, Charles.
With it what he
No,
will.
don't,
Nope, don't do that, Charles.
don't do that.
Burn your house down,
Don't
Charles.
do that, guys.
This is a humor podcast
Yeah, if you play
about
this
jokes. That was a
podcast-
Yeah,
joke.
did you say the disclaimer part already?
If you play it backwards, that's what it says. Burn your house down, Charles.
Don't do
Boy,
it.
well, if you
No.
listener out there would like
We're in a mood.
similar non-medical advice about something in your life, go ahead and send us a submission. You can either do it through a link in the show notes or go to our website, www.forhistorianspod.com, and send us a non-medical opinion question. We're looking for more. So with that, let's go to the main event. All right, we are about to hear some knowledge dropped from Aaron. Aaron, what do you got?
We're going to talk about the placebo and the placebo effect.
Mm.
I'm going to start off with definitions.
Yay!
You wrote
Yay.
declination. In
Well,
the document you
placebo
wrote
is a
declination.
word in
Declension.
Latin. Yeah, it's a declension of the noun placeo or a
Ooh.
conjugation of placare. I actually am not sure which. I tried to figure it out. Although I did figure out declension is for all parts of speech, not verbs, and conjugation is for verbs, I believe.
Ooh, it's
Hot
what you
start,
do.
man.
That's what you do in a class if they use that term. You're declenching your butt cheeks together because you're like, man, I'm a...
Yes. Yes, Latin.
I like the Latin start. This is great.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think it's awesome.
Latin and grammar. Like and subscribe, people. So if anyone out there knows if we're on the right track,
I'm sure they will let us know if we're not.
yeah, I'm sure they will. I think most listeners will probably be a little familiar with the term, but I actually, we are, because we're in medicine, so hopefully. But I did learn a lot going through this. I mean, in the sense we use it today, the word placebo entered the medical discourse in 1772. I believe that's the earliest one.
4 years before freedom.
Yep, that's right.
Wow.
Closely followed by freedom. Thanks to a book written by an English physician, Alexander Sutherland. He wrote a whole book about baths and bathing and mineral water as a miracle cure and as a fad. He was from Bath, England.
Well, as your fellow English major on the show, I know, Aaron, that you want me to make a Chaucer joke here, but I'm afraid I can't bury the lead.
That must be
Pause for effect.
Yeah.
Can't bury the lead? I can't bury the lead. Since I don't remember what those tales were all about, Mike.
Oh, Canterbury.
Thank
Oh, okay.
we need to sit with that for a second. Do you know how hard I worked on that?
You worked on it?
Mike!
Shut up, Mike.
I think it was good.
You write a Chaucer pun.
Yeah.
All right, I will.
Can't
Chaucer, I barely know her.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Came out with that so much quicker than I did.
So in his book, he made a character named Placebo. Now most
Wait, Chaucer
doctors,
did?
No, Sutherland.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Chaucer had a
Okay.
lot of characters, actually. So Sutherland made a character named Placebo. Now, most doctors at the time probably spoke a lot of Latin, so they would have probably recognized this. But he made a character, Placebo, which was his name for a fashionable doctor that didn't follow the current state of evidence. And the book is old enough that all the S's look like F's, which makes it very hard to read. So
I hated that when I was getting my English degree and we had to read stuff from this time period. It was so painful to try to turn F's into S's in your head.
But what are the what do the F's look like then?
They
Like
look
big
like
Fs.
giant, like big F's,
Okay,
but they
so
still have a crosshatch. And I was like, well, what's the difference between the S and the F? There's still a crosshatch. So anyway,
It's confusing.
I think it's like it was cheaper to use. I think it was cheaper to use the same printing die. Like you could use the F to serve as an F and an S instead of having to buy or having to get all of the different letters.
That makes sense.
That
that
sounds
could
true.
be. That could be, yeah.
We're not standing by it being true right now, but
Why didn't they just go B, 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 B?
It's just rattling around in my head. That might not be true.
He was not a fan of this. He was sort of trying to point out that fads were not great. So in part, if you go back to the original text, his description of placebo goes as follows. Placebo never saw a professor in his chair, nor never made up a doctor's prescription. Without knowledge, chemical or practical, he was fain to understand the waters better than them all. Without medical education of any sort, he had the full care of free force of the people of fashion. That's what he said. He goes on like that for a while. So that took a lot.
That's how I read it in my head, though.
Gosh,
So
that's
it's
really
fair.
hard. Wait, but there are S's in there anyway, so it actually doesn't make sense that it would be just.
Were there any F?
Yeah.
I don't know if there were.
Fashion has an S in it. And
That's could probably be an
3/4
Aaron oversight
has
more
an
than a
S in
text
it.
oversight, if I had to guess.
Understand. I like that word. That's fun. Understand.
I mean, it goes on like that for a while, though. So he's painting a picture of a fashionable rogue that produces magic drops without any quote unquote science. So,
Well, I'd like to point out that most of the medicine from this era that we've basically discussed on the show is pretty much actively toxic to patients. So this rogue doctor taking I don't poison my patients unlike the rest of my colleagues approach. It is admirable. It's just operating with a really low bar of success, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, placebo probably was a more popular doctor because his patients got sick less often. He probably had better outcomes. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I think we've covered that in this show, but yeah, for sure. So William Cullen used the term placebo in lectures that's a different doctor, in the late 1770s, saying, quote, what I call a placebo. So he used the word, so he's basically saying, I'm coining this to describe, at that time, an external application of mustard powder So he was specifically doing this because the patient had an expectation of receiving a medicine. And he figured if he was, well, that was one option for him. Then he said if he was giving an internal medicine, he thought the best choice was a small amount of Dover's powder, which had a small amount of opium and ipecac and was common for colds at the time.
You said the patient had an expectation of receiving medicine. Were they put off when he was just like squeezing mustard over them?
Well, that counted as medicine at that time. Yeah.
Oh. Spicy? Dijon? What was it?
It probably was spicy if it was mustard powder back then.
This is England, man. There ain't no
probably half
spicy
our
mustard.
snack.
In
Oh, you're
England.
right. It just tasted like bread, boiled potatoes.
It's just mustard powder and so much water. It's all watered down.
But then they put some stuff in it that made you sleepy and want to puke.
Yeah, it's this Dover's powder.
He thought he was giving her a fake medication, or he thought he was giving her real medication.
He thought she didn't need the medication, so he was going to give her a little bit of medicine so that it didn't.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, how about
her.
open communication, man? Just say, hey, listen, I don't think you need this.
It's
Okay, thank you.
1700s, man.
Thank you, doctor.
Yeah.
No,
They didn't get there.
no.
1700s, they hadn't figured out patient autonomy was a thing yet.
No. In that era, placebo was actually referenced multiple times, and it sort of grew in use as a medicine given to either, quote, make the patient happy or satisfy the patient's mind was another way they would say it. Usually at a dose thought to be too low to affect the patient or the disease process. So,
Well, in contrast, non-placebo doses of mercury would be used at that time to treat syphilis. And that wasn't only until the mind was satisfied. It was like until it was downright neurotoxic with heavy
Yeah,
Right.
why didn't
So
they use the
again-
placebo
Yeah,
effect
because
for
that's
mercury?
not good, right?
yeah, I know that should have done it a lot
When I give
more.
you sugar, it's really mercury. It's not.
So this continued through the late 1700s, early 1800s. Physicians used the concept of placebo in a few fun ways. There were articles that would pop up. In 1787, there was an article in a German medical journal about a woman who was treated with expensive-looking breadcrumbs covered with silver instead of a, quote, strong purgative, which has got to be either a laxative or something to make her throw up, an emetic.
Both sound fun.
Yeah. Before she was aware it was breadcrumbs, the pill was said to have the same effect as the actual purgative. So yeah, I don't know. So
basically
she
they
emptied.
were okay, but wait. So they gave her, if I'm following you correctly, they gave her breadcrumbs covered in silver.
Mm-hmm.
But they basically were telling her that this is gonna purge you.
Yeah.
But the doc at the time was saying, like, obviously breadcrumbs covered in silver don't purge people. That's ridiculous.
Right.
But then
That's
they did
crazy
work,
talk.
huh?
Yeah. Then they worked. And then I believe in that same article,
Science.
then they told her that they weren't real and then they didn't work. So I don't know. Yeah. Interesting.
Wait, so because for real though, well, breadcrumbs I know don't make me do that, but silver also wouldn't make me do that, right?
Right. No.
Like,
silver wouldn't.
okay,
No.
so then
Not that I'm
so
aware
it is
of.
what
I don't
we
eat a lot
think
of
as
silver.
placebo.
but I don't think
You
so.
should
Okay.
try it.
So this is like the placebo effect that like we
Yeah.
think of, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
potentially, yeah. There was another example. John Hunter, a famous British surgeon, was said to have, quote, cured syphilis with, quote, bread pills, which had at the time become a common placebo.
Are you saying they weren't really bread?
No, I'm saying they weren't really cured because syphilis has an obvious
that's right.
latent phase. I mean, so after you get past a certain phase, it goes silent for years and it's
well,
not gone.
although we haven't done this episode yet, what did John Hunter, the famous surgeon who cured syphilis, die of again?
Probably syphilis.
It was definitely syphilis. He was full of syphilis.
Oh, John. Oh, yeah.
Spoiler alert for
Cure
future
thyself.
episode.
And he was
Physician, cure thyself.
He was gluten free, so he couldn't eat bread. That's why he died.
Okay, maybe the
right.
gluten
That's
though. So maybe the gluten.
Gluten
But
and syphilis.
I'm
We're
ha-
having a party.
I'm having trouble understanding how you can cover breadcrumbs in silver. First, I feel like the
Just drip
breadcrumbs
it on the
would
outside.
crumble, maybe
Yeah,
on the outside.
maybe they're
these
croutons, yeah.
It's really stale bread. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, they're probably hand making some of these. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
painted
Yeah.
on. Maybe just silver paint.
Oh,
could be-
painted
that
on.
could be,
Okay,
yeah.
because I'm thinking of like silver. I forget
Pile of
that silver can be
breadcrumbs, spray
flakes.
paint. silver.
Oh
There you go.
yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
Boom.
There was Thomas Jefferson wrote
heard of
a
him.
letter about it's to a friend, but it's almost certainly about Benjamin Rush, who is another one of our founding fathers. We'll get to that. So Thomas Jefferson in the letter noted that this famous American physician told Jefferson that he used, let's see, first off, bread pills, drops of colored water, and hickory ash powder, which I can assume just doesn't really do much, more than quote
Tastes
all
smoky.
other medicines put together. Probably does taste smoky. Yeah, gives you a nice flavor to the smoked meat. So
Mhm.
if that is who it is, Benjamin Rush, who was a signatory of the Declaration of Independence, was actually recognized in 1965 as the father of American psychiatry by the American Psychiatric Association. So he kind of, he's a famous guy, by which time his use of mercury and a spinning chair to treat insanity was probably known, along with his hypothesis that being black was a curable skin condition based on a patient with vitiligo. So way to go, APA.
Oof.
That's the one you picked.
That's the guy right there.
Well, we have not done an
Ooh.
episode on Benjamin Rush, but I definitely like his name will come up when I'm like researching other stuff around this time. And I feel like it's always tied to something really dumb and boneheaded, like bleeding patients to death, which he was very fond of doing. We definitely have to do an episode on him at some time. I just don't know. I don't know why anybody would name a prominent medical school after the guy. He seemed like a really bad doctor for the time. And like at the time, doctors were pretty bad at medicine. So I don't know. Maybe I'm pretty sure he did a few things right, but Benjamin Rush, not good at this is kind of my general impression every time his name comes up.
Yeah, I will say, he was at the forefront of what was called heroic medicine. So, and I think that does actually have a lot to say, or a lot of influence still on our current practice, like this whole concept of doing everything possible.
Yeah,
He
the
too,
bleeding
just
of
like
patients, the leeches, all that stuff was all like you have to do something.
You have to
and
do
it's,
something
the heroic medicine.
and just go for it. Kind of like Hunter, who died as the thing he was trying to treat. Rush also was bled before he died. So yeah, he would be a great episode. In the letter, Jefferson referred to Rush's practice as a quote pious fraud, something done with full knowledge but good intent. So that's great. Good job, guys.
Pious fraud. I like that.
I mean,
phrase.
at the time, there's no concept of patient autonomy or, so they were trying to help patients.
That's what matters.
Yeah. So that's like the placebo itself in history. There also is a placebo effect, and they do seem like sort of separate things that were recognized in history. So physicians, they weren't blind to the fact that patients given the silver-coated breadcrumbs, for example, would still have a noticeable change in their condition. And that effect is related, of course, but it has its own history. And it was discussed by physicians and philosophers back to like the 1300s.
That's Chaucerian. Wasn't he 1300s?
Sure. Yes. Middle
He
English.
was.
Yes.
Ooh, excellent.
Not Old English.
Mm.
As far back as the 1500s, the French writer Michel de Montaigne noted. I just loved. I got to do that for my daughters, so they just are like, no.
I think it's Michel de Montaigne.
Oh yeah, you're right. Michel de Montaigne. He noted that a patient who received quote sham enemas with warm water, yes, the sham enemas had the same effects as enemas that contain quote medicine.
Wait.
I think neither would work.
Well, they're
Albert, you
gonna
have
work.
questions? You have questions
They're
on
gonna
this?
both work.
Can you take us through what you're feeling?
Sham enemas. I'm just gonna. It's not for any good cause except to just give you an enema, so it's a sham. This is okay.
Well, usually, like a sham treatment is something that kind of mimics the treatment, but like isn't really it. For instance, sham acupuncture is typically like, you're not, the patient can't see what's happening, but you're like kind of twirling toothpicks, as opposed to putting in acupuncture needles. I think it's probably really hard to design a sham enema because if you're a patient, you kind of know if you're getting an enema. It would be my thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what's in it.
The medicine is what makes the difference, Max. Come on now. The mercury in the water is what is the true medicine.
Well, that didn't feel like a turpentine enema.
What? It's just tap water? What in the hell?
Because isn't
What in the
that
hell?
a regular enema is just saline, right?
That's whatever you want to shoot
Uh,
up your butt.
Alba, there are recipe
There's
books.
a
Do you know
variety,
how
yeah.
many? There's
Oh,
so many
my.
different. There's
Yeah.
Oh.
soap suds. You got your milk and molasses enema. You've
Why
got
would
your
you do
fleets
that?
enema.
What?
I mean, soap
do
suds is actually
lactulose
pretty
through an enema.
decent, reasonably like
Mineral
effective.
oil enemas. Yeah.
Boy,
you can do
my
saline,
eyes have
too.
been opened.
Yeah, and
Because I only
Is it your
knew
eyes
of
that were
one
open?
reason to enema, and it would be saline
Yeah.
was what I thought was for cleaning out the backside. But
well, and I
well.
think at some point I have looked into like which one of those is best, and there's no answer to that. It's you just when you order it, and you do order it, even in the emergency department in certain cases, right? You have to then. You just ask the nurse what their favorite is. And honestly, most of them have a favorite. Not that it's their favorite procedure to do, let's be clear, but they usually have like their go-to. Like, no, I'm a soap suds.
It's the fleets.
person.
Yeah.
You think it's the fleets?
Yeah, just
Fleets
because
is
it's
smaller
ease of
volume.
use.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's
the
already
soap
in a
suds,
bottle.
like you're committing. The soap suds, there's like it's a big bottle, like
a
or
big bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Milk and
Big old
molasses
tube.
just sounds gnarly.
Mm-hmm.
Who would want to know?
That's what we did at the hospital for little adults.
The children's hospital.
I don't know. They're just little adults. Treat them the same. Just,
I wouldn't
right.
have thought there would be so many different options. But
There's
there
a
you
lot
go.
of passion behind enema
that
choice.
wasn't it. There's more.
There is more.
Oh my.
Mhm.
Let's just talk about enemas.
Ooh.
So there was a switch around the 1940s. So there's a couple things that happened, but really from the 1940s on, the use of the word placebo has exploded. And if you look at a couple websites, you sort of see they'll track incidents of words in the language, which is fun for
That's kinda
English
fun.
majors. But like, yeah, it like steeply increases around 1940, and it's become a big part of sort of our modern discussion about a lot of things. A big reason it was used more was this rise of we're just say evidence-based medicine, and that's not the topic of the podcast, but it has a lot to do with this one aspect of placebo and such. And
It's
there was
medicine for nerds.
yeah, exactly. And there was in the 40s a new accepted sort of standard and an attempt to do clinical trials in a more scientific way with medical advances. And a big part of it was World War II. So after all the Nazi doctors were tried at the Nuremberg trials, which 100% future episode because it's crazy, there was a Nuremberg Code, which is kind of like, I would think of it as the Magna Carta of modern medical ethics, which turned into the Helsinki Declaration in the 60s. And the sort of concept of like placebo-controlled trial or randomized trial became much more defined.
Yeah, well, listeners might think of the Magna Carta as the U.S. Constitution of Law and Modern Civil Society. Let's talk American over here, Aaron.
Constitution was still based on the Magna Carta.
Not hearing that.
It came out of nowhere. Freedom, right? They just wrote it.
We thought of freedom in 1776, wrote it down. You're welcome, world.
Oh, we made it up. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're the authors of freedom.
That's what I thought. That's what I learned. Yeah.
But yeah, that was a big change. You know, doctors as far back as James Lind in the 1700s had thought to compare different methods when they did studies. And that's sort of that trial for scurvy, because he was a ship doctor with the
Ooh,
English.
Yeah.
That was considered, if not one of the first sort of randomized trials, because he's like, wow, all these guys are getting sick. I need to do something. And he had like 7 groups. He compared arsenic, limes, vinegar, seawater, sulfuric acid, and then like a special contraption that included a bunch of herbs and such for scurvy.
Contraption or concoction?
Concoction. Yeah, not a contraption. That'd be even
It was
worse.
delivered via contraption.
Yeah,
Like a
exactly.
catapult of herbs into your mouth.
Yeah. And spoiler, the limes are what works, right? So scurvy is a deficiency in vitamin C, correct? Right? Isn't that?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
that's what I heard.
Yeah. So, right.
need
So
that
the
That's
limes
vitamin yes.
contain. Yeah.
For our Spanish colleagues.
Vitamin C. Yeah. So, but then the rigor increased tremendously in the 40s. And the first trials that randomized patients to either placebo or a medication were starting to be conducted at the end of the 40s.
I really do hope that the randomization they used was that like lotto machine where they have all the balls floating up and they collect them, because they didn't have random number generators in the 40s, really, I would think. They probably had tables, but
Yeah, you
I
could
think the
shake an
lotto ball
abacus.
machine.
The
Ooh, yeah,
random
you
number
could.
generators was Mike. That's
69.
Mike, pick a number.
69.
Says
it's
that number.
random. So I think it's worthwhile. I think that's kind of where it came from. And then we shift. There's some really, really fascinating discussions about like the science behind placebos and the placebo effect. So I did reference it in the show notes, but there's a really good article in the journal Nature that basically has some good definitions. So placebo in the modern era is a treatment that is physically and pharmacologically inert. So it doesn't have any measurable direct therapeutic effect on the body. The placebo effect is, well, what they described it as brain-body responses to context information that promote health and well-being.
And I think I have looked a bit ahead, and I think you've done a really excellent job at selecting so many examples that explain why this concept is so complicated. The placebo effect, even though that one sentence you just said kind of like gives a general overview, there's so many ways to investigate it. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. And let's be clear, we're, practicing emergency or palliative physicians or, social workers. So like, we're not basic science people, but I do think that like this concept and such, I mean, we can all apply it to what we do. So there are a ton of trials that have been conducted on the effect, which I think we should talk about for a little bit. And then these are trials that are on the placebo effect itself, but then there are innumerable trials that use some form of a placebo arm or a sham arm. So when you talk about arms in evidence-based medicine, arm is a word for one group or the other. So for example, if you're going to test a blood pressure medication, you have a placebo arm, which is a group of people that are randomized to get a placebo versus people that are randomized to get the actual medicine you're studying.
You want to be in the bicep of that arm.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
the good pump.
The gains are in the bicep. Actually, not the strongest muscle for
in the
elbow
arm
flexion. Yeah,
oh, really?
brachioradialis is actually much stronger, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah, I think a bicep.
Beer
is more
drinking muscle.
Probably. That's probably the most important beer drinking muscle. Anyway,
Which one? Brachioradialis for
I
beer
think
drinking?
so. I think yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Mike, can
Mike's
you
like, "I don't
describe the
care. I don't
insertion and
care."
origin of that muscle?
got
The brachioradialis
Yeah, where does that? What bone does that insert?
It starts in the brachium and it ends on the radialis.
Nice. Wait, can I guess?
No, I just said it.
You may guess.
Oh, never mind.
He kind of.
I didn't know that was right. I thought that was
It's
made
not.
up.
There's probably a tubercle off of something, and then it goes to
Everything
another
you
one.
say, I think is made up. Everything you say, Mike, I've accused you of making stuff up so many
It's the
times.
placebo
I think
effect.
it's just your tone.
Yeah.
It's just your tone.
Mike's a mixture of the placebo and Mandela effect. It's a lot to deal with.
This is a lot.
With a little touch of gaslighting.
That's right.
All right,
Just a little
Ebenezer,
touch.
Come on.
In general, Ebenezer, the placebo effect is more noticeable with chronic conditions and with painful conditions or conditions where subjective reports are the gold standard. So when we study pain, especially, we rely on patient reports, which are subjective. Like we don't have a way to measure pain other than to ask patients, does it hurt more or less? And how does it hurt?
Yeah, but we have
and so
that
on.
little scale. Look at that 1 to 10 scale.
It's completely objective.
Are you
The smiley faces
Yeah.
and the frowny faces
Are you
scale.
still
Yeah.
frowning?
Oh, you're at,
Why are you still
at
frowning?
sad. They're still at sad. We need to make them at the happy again.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to sort of objectively measure that gold standard necessarily. Excuse
Easy.
me.
Easy.
purgative?
There's
Everybody, Aaron just almost threw up
Purgative.
onto his microphone.
I didn't
That was
throw up. It was a burp at
That was a
worst.
risky belch.
It was a burp at
I'll
worst.
edit it out
Let's
for the
calm
fans,
down.
but oof.
Let's calm down. Let's calm down here. It's
But that was a
wet.
deep one. That came from deep within the recesses. That was like, I'd say at
came
least
from the
10
minds
feet.
of
words
warrior.
delved too deeply. Okay,
That was a ball rug.
that was. There is no way to objectively measure the gold standard, although the body does have unavoidable physiological responses to pain. So elevated heart rate, breathing, rapid breathing, dilated pupils, and such.
But it's the same with love. Love is pain. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Anyway,
Yeah, right?
Yeah, all those things.
Life is
Love is
pain.
pain.
Yeah. No,
I thought love was a battlefield.
it hurts. It burns. Anyway,
It does
so in
burn
many
sometimes.
studies,
It burns sometimes. Probably now since Tinder, it probably burns a lot.
Aaron, go to a doctor. And not Mike. Don't go
Oh,
to Mike or
no.
me.
In many studies, the placebo effect is the same or greater than medications with those types of outcomes. And it does
With the
show a lot of
subjective
effects.
outcomes, like
Yeah,
how much did
subjective
it help my
outcomes.
pain kind of thing.
So let's do some examples because we're kind of in the weeds here, and that it just is what it is. It's a little complex. So there was a study that compared the nervous system response, reported response, and brainwave response to painful stimuli, and they did a sham cream. So as the placebo. So they said this cream will change the way you experience pain, but it was just the same cream and it didn't do anything.
Better than a sham enema.
Yeah, definitely better than sham enema.
Or a cream enema.
Yes, it's way better than that. So in phase 1, they would give different levels of pain response that they shared with the patient, but then told them if the pain is less strong than it was the cream. Actually, no, they didn't share with.
Wait, you're saying so they induced like a painful response? Is that what you're
so they
saying?
induced a painful response, but then the cream, the painful stimuli changed, but they told the patient like the cream was stronger. Right?
How did
so
they
tried
induce
to trick
pain?
There's a bunch of like these. There's either little shocks or lasers or something. Like I don't think it's super painful.
Laser pain?
Yes, laser pain. Yeah, there are
Lasers.
some that are laser
Oh, God.
pains. And then they repeated it with the identical stimuli, and the patients that had the quote unquote strong cream had a lower pain response in all those metrics if they had the strong cream. Does that make sense? Like if they thought
does.
they had the strongest cream, even if the pain stimuli was the same, they felt it less.
They gave him cream of lies.
Yes. It was cream
Yeah.
of lies. Yes.
It's
Well, I
wild.
do think though this does actually highlight why science communication related to the placebo effect is like always difficult and fraught, because that effect is really complex, and the just saying placebo effect, it doesn't describe like every type of reaction. This is like sort of one reaction, right? So you give them this cream, you condition them to believe that it works better, like Pavlov, like making the dogs drool. Ring the bell, give the dog food, and then in the future you ring the bell again and the dog drools. Like that's classic, but it's conditioning, and in this case probably could explain why you get this type of placebo effect. I know you're going to talk about other ones, but I think it's fair to say that Pavlov's ringing bell was a placebo, and it did induce a physiologic action in dogs, dog drooling. So it's like one aspect to explain a placebo effect, and we're going to talk about a bunch more.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that there definitely is some conditioning here, but they've looked at a lot of other subjective symptoms. And I think when you think about the conditioning, that leads into some of the theories about how patients might respond to subtle cues that might cause the effect. So if you go to a doctor, there are cues about what's going on. You're in a certain setting. The practitioner might be wearing a white coat or not, if they're gray coat, maybe.
Who would do that?
The
or
behavior
a
of
hoodie if they're a Gen Z doc. What's up, bro? It brings you in, man. Why? I'm so pissed. Don't you know I'm the doctor? Doesn't my T-shirt give it away, man?
Okay.
Is that how they be?
Is that what it's like?
Listen, I've already done 30 minutes today. I got to take a lunch break. Otherwise, I'm out of here, man.
Is Gen Z already in the hospital? Are they
I think-
already old
well, I
enough to
don't know.
be
Probably.
doctors?
Well, they're getting there. Yeah, they're
For
getting
sure,
there.
the millennials.
They're coming.
We'll change
yeah.
it to millennials.
Hey, let's not dish on millennials, especially not elder millennials.
I don't know. We might blow up on X or
Yeah, I
whatever it's
think
called
yeah.
these days if we
Yeah.
trash them enough.
Gen Z is not
Yeah.
on X.
But yeah, there are a lot of things that might relate to that, not just conditioning. So it's also all these context cues. So there was a study that compared encounters for the common cold with regards to whether the practitioner was supportive and empathetic. And we're going to love this because it's not great news for us necessarily. So people in a primary care setting with a cold, that was determined by the patient thought they had a cold and they had to have symptoms of a cold, at least like
That's probably
one
why they thought
sore
they had
throat,
one.
congestion. Well, yes, but they also like controlled. So they divided them into 3 groups: staff only, so no practitioner at all; clinician that offered quote unquote standard care, which in this study was essentially what an ER doc would do at 2 a.m. because the standard visit specifically limited eye contact, limited touch, and limited time. So
You're not painting us in a good light.
no, at 2 a.m. Come on now for a cold.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean sometimes.
We all know empathy stops after midnight.
That's right. Why are you here? When are you leaving? And then there was a third group that tried really hard to follow like a specific tool to promote empathy. So think like, okay, here's the 6 steps of things you're going to do to like take care of this patient. And then they compared survey responses as to whether, so the tool, they did a survey afterwards. Did the clinician make them feel at ease? Did they understand your concerns? Did they allow you to tell your story? Did they listen? Did they show care and compassion? Were they positive? Did they create a plan? Did they help patient take control? Right. So a lot of things.
It's a lot of work for a cold.
Yeah, it is. It is. So what they, and actually like, that's a great description of what sort of happened. Right. So then when they studied the results, they divided the patients who were seen by a clinician that achieved a perfect score on the survey to all the other ones who didn't. Right. So that included all the other people that saw all the other, and it was not, so about 84 versus 240. Right. So there were a minority that achieved a perfect score, but those people that did, their cold duration was like statistically shorter, 7 days instead of 8 days.
Whoa.
So like it actually shortened the duration of the cold. Now,
so numbers.
Yeah.
Or shorten the duration of their perception of the cold.
Well, so interestingly, right, but that's what matters, right? Like a cold's not, you want to get better faster. That's what happened, this is equivalent to antibiotics and strep throat, right? It's less than a day that it makes you feel better. So,
and there can be ripple effects that happen with like the difference in that encounter over the next 7 or 8 days. There could be, things that you might do differently based on the conversation or how that encounter went, that could ultimately, changes in mood, changes in stress and stuff like that can, I would imagine, could all lead to that change.
Yeah,
so not necessarily just the one thing, but like the whole system at play is impacted by that conversation that then could maybe have an effect on the length.
Yeah, for sure. But follow me down the rabbit hole, because the more you study this effect, the crazier it gets. So yeah, all the stuff up until now that we've discussed could be just like subjective, maybe some conditioning, but our science is getting better, and we can start to measure like levels of hormones and levels of neurotransmitters and functional MRI studies and so on. So for example, there's a migraine medication that we won't name because we don't need that kind of show, that is an injection, and it'll measurably
we're not
raise.
Going to name it because we don't want to.
It's hot beef. He just doesn't want to say it.
You inject hot beef into your brain, and that makes
not into your brain.
Back away from the crevice.
What?
Back away from the hot beef injection joke.
Oh, I don't get it.
It's okay.
Oh no!
Is it filthy,
It
Mike?
is.
Of course, it's
Yeah.
filthy.
Filthy, yes.
Mike. Okay, but this is why I don't believe you when you say real stuff.
Why would they inject hot beef?
I don't know. But sometimes you say words that sound like they're just made up.
The joke is already there. It's already visible.
I don't know.
Oh my god. Oh, okay.
I don't know where I can use that, but I also don't want to lose it.
So anyway, there's a migraine medication that is an injection, and it measurably raises levels of certain neurotransmitters in the brain. So you can see this has this effect. But there was a study that showed that the same neurotransmitters rose even if salt water was injected in the same setting subsequently. So that's also potentially conditioning, but then you have a saline injection causing a measurable effect in the brain.
Normalsaline. It's one of our favorites.
Yeah,
Normalsaline,
right?
Normalsaline. Oh, that sounds like it's really strong.
Well, I think one of the interesting things you can think about there, I think you hinted at it, Aaron, is patients are part of the study. They're getting something. It's a jab. They don't know what's in the jab. And possibly that interaction of knowing they're doing something for me, whether or not you're getting a placebo, could set all kinds of interesting, intricate physiologic, neurologic changes to make them feel better.
Yeah. It does. It's crazy though, but it's more that's in, yeah. So if you give rats morphine, a similar injection subsequently of salt water will also reduce pain responses.
Okay, well that
could be conditioning too.
Is weird.
But
what? So wait, hold on.
So you're tapping into the brain's ability to manage the system better.
Yeah.
Ooh, put a pin in that.
Potentially.
Put a
Don't
pin
put a
in
pin in the
that.
rats. You already stabbed them with morphine and saline. Leave them alone.
No, put a pin in Mike. You don't need to put a pin in the rats.
Okay, let's
Put a
pins
pin
in
in me.
Mike.
We could put
Elba,
a pin
you want to
in
put a
Mike.
pin in
Put a
Mike?
pin in
I
it.
would every day. I would pin some hot beef on Mike.
I don't think she still gets it,
I
guys.
don't know what hot beef is.
Just Google
I mean,
it,
like,
and then we'll continue.
is it a phallus? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Elba.
Okay, well, that's not that funny then. It's just
But the joke
dong.
is still carried.
You just yeah.
Oh.
It's funnier if it's roast beef.
If you label a milkshake, indulgent, patients produce lower levels of hunger hormones than if you label a milkshake sensible.
All right, so there again, you
Yep.
have you set up an interesting situation where they're thinking ahead. That milkshake is indulgent. It's full of calories. I'm definitely not hungry.
Yep.
But possibly we know that your brain thinks ahead. You think of food, you start salivating. True story. And you
Yep.
start that. So it's kind of a neat brain gut connection.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that tracking. That seems to make some sense.
They've correlated taste cues to effects on your immune system. So they did a study where if you give an immunosuppressant drug with a specifically flavored beverage, the same beverage subsequently will suppress your immune system still.
Okay. How did they measure that, though? They just interview the patient's white blood cells and be like, hey, how much do you want to fight?
Well, I don't really want to fight very much. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I am
like
curious, though.
this,
How did they measure that? Do you know?
Markers. So there are, and I did link to the study where most of these come from, and then in the notes of that study from the journal Nature, there's a lot of these references, but they're measuring specific levels of activity in the immune system itself. So probably interleukins, which are a certain type of signaling molecule that gets released and causes changes, downstream effects.
I don't remember what they all do.
Me neither. And there's like 1 to 8, and there's probably more than that. It's very complicated. And I had a lot of flashcards at one time, and now I've forgotten them. They've done a histamine study. So histamine is a compound that body makes that can cause allergic reactions. So you kind of make it, and it's a chemical that your body makes to cause effects in other cells. And then you store it in cells. And then if there's an allergic reaction, it explodes, and it can cause anaphylaxis and hives, which are a bummer. But if you describe a placebo drug as an antihistamine, you can get a measurably smaller skin response to an allergic trigger.
That feels inexplicable. Sorry.
Well, interestingly, this is one that I don't know if this is the study you're talking about. Is this the Claritin Zyrtec study?
I don't
Do you
know,
Aaron?
I don't know for sure. I didn't follow
That's one I have heard of. I heard something about this on another podcast I was listening to. But it was interesting because they took histamine, the substance, and they kind of, if you rub it on your skin, I didn't even know this, you can induce a welt. So like a raised area of swelling, just like a mosquito bite. It'll look the same, called a wheal. But if you put that on somebody, it's not really an allergic reaction, just that molecule will do that. So they did a study where they took all these people and they gave them all Claritin. Like, you're all getting Claritin. We're going to rub this stuff on the skin and measure the welt, see how much of an allergic reaction you have. But while they're doing this, take your Claritin, then they started showing them commercials. And one group of the study participants got a Zyrtec commercial, which Zyrtec is a Claritin-like medication. So they're both the same class of antihistamine. And the Zyrtec commercial was like, use Zyrtec, Claritin doesn't work, more or less basically dogging Claritin. And so what they found is that the people who watched the Zyrtec commercial had less of a response to the Claritin. Like, it didn't work as well because the idea was introduced that there was a better medicine than Claritin out there. And this actually demonstrates something I'd never heard of until they mentioned this, the nocebo effect, where basically you have a sham treatment that causes a negative outcome as opposed to a placebo, which gives you a positive outcome. And I thought that was fascinating because imagine the implications for marketing.
Yeah.
Well, they do it all the time. Every commercial is attacking their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you think about the nocebo effect, think about all these implications or discussions about how like social media and all these things cause negative effects. The nocebo effect is, it's like Bizarro Superman It's like the opposite. It's the Joker to the Batman,
Because then you're like, no, I don't want to believe that it's not going to work just because I saw this thing, but now I'm starting to think that it's not going to work. So
And
what if it's not going to work because I think it's not going to work?
Yeah, it'll have a measurable effect as well. Yeah, for sure. No, that's the histamine one. I don't think it was that example. I think this was one that demonstrated a placebo. There was also like the other questions have to do with, does it matter how the information is received? Is it more powerful if it's social? So there was a study where they had essentially what it sounds like was sort of a secret agent or a study participant among a group that was dealing with altitude headaches, and that person introduced a placebo that said it was a treatment for altitude headaches, and it caused a measurable effect on a compound called prostaglandin, which would be a measurable thing in the blood, which contributes to altitude headaches. And so if the secret study participant told everyone, hey, this placebo is going to make you feel better with altitude headaches, they would have a measurable drop, and it was like a stronger effect if it was socially transmitted. So there's also this whole thing about, how does the information come to you?
Interesting. That person then went on to sell them the same tablets later.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
They were giving them the pills in a hyperbaric chamber, so the study was flawed.
So in the most there's a lot of data around pain. So there's this whole group of studies that have used functional MRI imaging, which essentially shows like what part of the brain is active under certain stimuli. It's a really cool technology, which we don't use in the ER at all. We're
No, I want to, though.
We want to. It'd be cool.
I want to go through a functional MRI.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Why don't you describe generally what it is?
Yeah, what is it?
So not a basic scientist, but essentially you're looking at where is your
Aaron,
brain.
You're basically a scientist, though.
You're a basic scientist.
Basically.
So functional MRI measures. I don't know if
Function.
it's blood. It's probably blood flow, right? I mean, it's essentially brain activity based on MRI changes in certain parts of the brain. So you have a map of the brain, and then you give a patient some sort of stimulus, either picture or painful stimuli or something like that. And it'll light up a certain part of the brain so you can see like what portion of the brain corresponds to what thing is happening to that patient.
Yeah, like showing them pictures they don't like, and you see a certain area light up, and you're actually watching it in real time. And
it's the discuss center.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool because it gives you generally like, ooh, the brain's working more in this area right now. Wonder what that area does, and it lets people,
or if you
lets neuroscientists kind of get a general idea of differences in brain function. Mm-hmm.
That sounds really cool, but I think I would feel really vulnerable. I would be like, oh my God, I'm gonna be figured out as the nut job that I am,
I mean, fair, but like you're not like you don't have to outwardly you're not going to show anything. I mean, yeah, it is.
You're not going to know.
Potentially a little invasive.
The screen's
right?
going to be behind you, and they're going to show you, disgusting things, and it's going to be like, oh, our happy centers are getting triggered.
Yeah, right. And they're like, oh,
you're just all in the booth while Alba's in the machine, just shaking their heads slowly.
Kind of an outlier. They also do brainwave studies. So you'll do EEG studies. You got the little electrodes on the head, and that measures electrical activity in the brain on different frequencies, and you can actually see a lot of those things. But really, so there's a couple takeaways from that. One is pain is exceedingly complex. So there are multiple 5 or 6 different interconnected areas of the brain alone that sort of light up on functional MRI imaging when we're trying to study pain. And that pain has already gone through the spinal cord from the nerves somewhere else in the body linked. So there's this whole chain, and then it's just this whole cascade of different effects.
Yeah, like the pain signal goes up the nerve, like you hurt your finger. The pain signal goes from the finger up to the spinal cord, then eventually makes it up to your brain. At all those levels, it can be regulated differently to where it may be increased or decreased depending on what the stimulus was. And then by the time it gets to the brain, the way that we all think about and feel pain and experience it is different person to person. So there's so many different places that can be changed.
It's different person to person, and it does overlap with parts of the brain that have to do with emotion and sort of cognitive function. So it's the same areas, like the same parts of your brain are doing different things. But it gets even crazier. So there are other studies with functional MRI imaging that show that it's not, your brain isn't just receiving. It's not just oh, well, this is my information, I'm just going to pass it on. There are parts of the deep brain, again, if folks are interested, link to the study in the show notes. There are parts of the brain that will actually project back down into the spinal cord. And then the spinal cord has dampened pain responses. So you can sort of top down decrease the pain response below. And those pathways look like they probably use endogenous opioidergic transmitters. So endogenous meaning inside the body, and opioidergic meaning, essentially internal chemicals that are similar to morphine or, to be honest, fentanyl or anything like that. So, well, less so fentanyl because that's synthetic. But anyway,
yeah, correct.
Internal opioids and such, right? That's you can make those pain depressing molecules or transmitters like yourself, and people do.
Well, so. I think if I remember correctly, the word endorphin is literally an endogenous morphine. That's kind of where that word comes from.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you have, it's, I guess the common thing, if we've had a runner's high, I think I've maybe had one. I don't know.
Never.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not I don't know if I even believe that's real. But anyway, like
have you had runner's diarrhea?
Yeah. Yes.
Who has
that's
it?
Yes, I have. That is the worst. Yeah, that's runner's low. That's not runner's high. But yeah, so and then like you can block that. So the same medicine that anyone should feel very free to pick up for free in a vending machine or their pharmacy if they have any risk for opioid exposure, Narcan or naloxone, you can block that dulling stimulus with naloxone. So the same thing that blocks morphine, you can use that to block your own internal neurotransmitters, which is kind of crazy. It's the same chemical. It's the same
Seems like it would suck.
Yeah, that would suck. Get that away from me, man.
I'm naturally killing
I'm
my
doing
own
it myself, man.
Yeah, no way. Let's not interrupt that.
Aaron, again, there was on the show I listened to recently, kind of about placebos. They did talk about the sort of rat hotfoot study. Do you know if this was kind of related to that?
I do not know because we should link that show maybe in the podcast notes as well.
I will. It's what is it? Skeptics with a K. It's out of the UK. Awesome, Michael Marshall.
Yeah, I don't know what was the
really good show.
Hotfoot rat study.
I'll try to here. I don't know. I'll try to summarize. I don't know if we'll keep it in. Well, what they did was the crux of it was they wanted to study placebo effect in this case, and they had rats divided into two. There's two chambers that were connected, and they could go between the two chambers in one iteration of this. And the floor of one of the chambers was heated up to the point where it wouldn't actually it was uncomfortable, so they wouldn't want to be in that chamber. They'd kind of jump, or they'd lick their feet. I guess those are rat pain behaviors. I don't know. And so what they did was they let the rats in one part of the study go into the room that then was hot. So the rats would have the pain behaviors, and then they would go retreat to the other room, which was at a comfortable temperature. And then what they did is they did this for 6 days. And then on the final day, they made both of the little rat rooms hot. And so they really couldn't escape the uncomfortable floor. And there was a control group of rats that were just in comfortable situations all week. So the hot room rats, basically when both rooms were too warm to stand on comfortably, when they went to the first room that they were used to being the bad room, they immediately left it and went to the room that they would go to try to get relief. Mm-hmm. And when they got to that other room and it was still hot, they actually tended to have fewer behaviors, apparently, of pain. Mm-hmm. They were still having the same stimulus of pain, mm-hmm. but they were just dealing with it better. The rats who were initially the control, who had none of that exposure, were just, I guess, miserable or whatnot. But what the crux of this study is that they measured something to the effect of the rats had probably, I don't think they even measured it. I think the theory behind the study was that the rats who were exposed to the painful stimulus then were able to better tolerate where they couldn't really get away from it because their brains had just been generating more endorphins as a response. But the interesting criticism there, besides being mean to rats, which I don't love, was that too was kind of a sort of a conditioning. They would go into the room was hot, and so then their brains were conditioned to release more endorphins anyway. And so by the time that they couldn't find a room of good relief, it was you induced this kind of classical conditioning in these rats, which did produce a physiologic change, but I'm not sure
they're ready for it.
They were, yeah. So you kind of just, I don't know. It wasn't like there was no effect. It seems like you just conditioned their bodies to release more endorphins because you made them in pain every day to a degree.
Yeah,
to a degree.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean,
don't-
it's all
hard
of
to
the
say. Is that
above,
placebo,
right?
or is that just you? If you torture rats a little
Conditioning.
bit, they
Well,
get
Could be
better at
conditioning
dealing
too,
with
but
pain, which is
still,
sad.
But it could be opiate receptor downregulation too. That happens.
Right.
Possibly, yeah,
Right.
possibly.
I mean, I think when you look at these studies, the fascinating thing is just how complex it is. We sort of think of it
Yes.
as a relatively simple thing, like you poke me and it hurts. No, that's not. Like, it depends on how you feel about the person who's poking you, what they poke you with, how you're doing that day. What is your prior experience with getting poked? What's your general propensity to have pain when you get poked? I mean, all of that kind of plays into it, and we're not the same as people, and we aren't the same as ourselves depending on what the conditions were here or there. And it's not just like the opioidergic cascade is one, but then there's, I mean, tons of these implicated. There's all these neurotransmitters like serotonin, which is a target for drugs like Zoloft, oxytocin, which is a tremendously interesting hormone that is generally, I mean, it was sort of released a lot during breastfeeding, for example, but also gets released a lot of different times and has to do with
What
like
times, Aaron?
bonding and sort of emotional attachment to
I just wanted you to
people.
say sex.
There may be something to that. Dopamine, right? So
French fry
dopamine is like
potatoes.
this.
You sound like Slim
Dopamine
Blade.
is like a hugely important pathway as far as reward signaling and addiction when it goes wrong, but also like, you know, you get rewarded for positive behavior. So all of them kind of tie into these things and this effect. Yeah, it's just, I think we're just starting to get there, but the placebo effect, I mean, you got to sort of come to the conclusion that it's complex and real and a very interesting part of especially chronic conditions.
But I think they're missing the point. Like, just from the brief overview of these studies, like, these researchers believe that the placebo effect is a thing. And then, like, they're going to be maybe a little biased with some of these reactions to some of these studies, and like maybe make something out of nothing. Like you said, it's probably really complex. It's not just one hormone, one thing. It's a bunch of things together. And I do think, like, our brains most likely have the ability to help. Like, there's some people that don't experience tons of pain, and maybe they could just access some part of their brain where it's like, you know what, I'm not going to let it hurt. You see that with grief too. Like, some people don't grieve and some people do. And why does that person grieve? It's not because he had a sugar pill. It's because he's set up different or can access parts of his brain potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I sound like kind of a weirdo, but
like like self-regulation. And there's a lot of meditation is centered around that the more you meditate, the more awareness you have of like kind of mind over matter, your mind body functioning, mind body connection. And so like the ability to accept versus to fight is, you know, like acceptance and commitment therapy is something that I'm learning about now. Like as the negative stimulus comes in, the more you fight the thing, the more trouble you're going to have with whatever the thing is, versus having that mind body connection to say like, okay, these are my circumstances. This is the thing. I accept that these are my circumstances, and I am committed to making do or making the best situation I can out of this. And so it's removing the struggle. There is the attempt of it anyway. So I think that makes total sense.
It's very stoic.
Well, isn't there, for pain psychology, isn't there something like there's like pain psychology where it is trying to train people to interpret pain signals like cognitively different? And man, am I not going to do it justice, because I don't know anything beyond it other than maybe that's a real thing. And here's where I'm hoping that Alba will dive in and save me and be like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I wish
Go.
I did. I've heard of it before. I've
Okay.
definitely heard of that before. And I've heard that pain and pain and pleasure are super closely linked, which if you look at like BDSM or anything along those lines, it makes total sense that there would be a strong connection.
The BDSM-4 or is BDSM-5?
Yes, the BDSM. Well, we're in the BDSM-5 now, depending, you know, depending on when you catch me.
Oh my God, I think that might be my favorite joke of all time.
That's a pretty good one. But yeah, I've heard of that before, that you can kind of retrain yourself to interpret pain as pleasure. And I think the BDSM community would agree with me that they are super closely
New
linked
followers.
and that you can
Yes.
interpret those things that way, right?
Whatever.
Because anyway.
We're welcoming.
Oh,
It's
the
fine.
other thing too,
Yeah.
just to kind of piggyback on that, like we in the ER have this, we have real-time examples of this. Like we probably use it all the time, but like one is chronic abdominal pain that gets better with IV droperidol, which is not a pain medicine, but it's a nausea medicine that's also an antipsychotic.
It works on dopamine. It's a dopamine blocking agent.
Yeah, so it's like we're treating pain using a non-pain medicine, but the person believes that it's going to help with their pain, and it does.
Well,
Wait, sorry, is it a dopamine blocking or a dopamine reuptake inhibitor?
no,
Does
it's
it
an
make more
anti-dopamine.
dopamine?
So
Oh.
I believe most of the, if not all of the antipsychotics work by decreasing dopamine. They're like dopamine blocking. They block the effects of, and yeah, droperidol, same thing. But it's a great time to say.
Oh,
there's
because psychotic
yeah.
is different from antidepressant. Okay,
There you go. Yep.
Thanks.
No, you're right though. There are
Two
medicines that
different
do block dopamine reuptake. There's also the concept, especially now that I'm learning palliative medicine, of basically what we call total pain, right? So pain is, yes, the thing that hurts and causes the pain that you feel. But if you're somebody who's struggling with cancer and you have multiple tumors, etc., like your pain is not just those tumors, but it's also kind of the way that they make you feel and everything that you're going through. And a lot of that has a lot of psychiatric or at least psychosomatic overtones. And so it's not super surprising that some of the medicines that do function in the brain do help with pain, because the pain signals go through the brain and they're interpreted by all those multifactorial ways and parts of the brain involved with emotion. And so even when you talk about droperidol, it's not a classic pain medicine in terms of like an opiate or a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, but it's working in the brain. So maybe perceiving those pain signals from the gut, it does kind of make some sense that it might do that. But I think that's probably a good stopping place. I think that about does it. So, Alba, have you managed to pick and procure an artifact from the episode to add to the PH Pod annals of medical history?
How could I not? I most certainly choose silver breadcrumbs.
Oh,
I mean, that's
going to be a
come
tough
on.
one.
Nice.
I can make that
I'm
happen.
sorry, Max. You know,
I
every episode I can't pick something simple, but it's because it's so unique. I mean, come on, silver breadcrumbs.
That was cool.
As medicine.
That's an old timey Victorian doctor right there. Like,
but with this economy, it would have to
special
be
medicine,
pewter breadcrumbs or something.
Spray paint that Max was talking about.
Absolutely. Now I appreciate it. We're going to put that in the vault. So I do like it because I do get these. I give these like cryptic posts like a week after the episode of like that image, and I'm just like, silver breadcrumbs. What did we talk about? So I enjoy it. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you out there. If you'd like to check out our merchandise, provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.poorhistorianspod.com. There is where you can send us messages, and you can find links to our social media sites. We do work to respond to all those posts on all those social media accounts, so reach out, likely we'll say something. We do want to thank our PHPod patrons for helping make the show possible. If you want to be a special part of the House of Medical History, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/4historianspodcast. A free way to support us, though, is to tell a friend about us. Or hey, go and leave us one of those nice 5-star reviews on Spotify, iTunes, or whatever platform you choose. And speaking of which, let's close out with a reading of another one. Alba, you got this?
I do. The title is Love It. 5 stars.
Good start.
Binging this a few days before I start medical school. Love the combo of medical history plus funny stuff. P.S. I really want to see a pic of Max's mustache.
They do exist out there. I'm in a few different places, but it's a handlebar.
It's quality mustache.
We should check in on Luke and see how he's doing.
Yeah, this was from a while ago. Oh man, I didn't realize I grabbed it. This is from a year ago.
Yeah, we really should.
MS2 year.
Oh, so Luke is an M2 now.
Yeah.
If you're still listening, Luke, send us a message. Give us an update. It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, the Poor Historians are signing out.
These are nuts.
I knew you had to get it out. So are you proud of me for that classy D's nuts joke?
That was good. Yeah.
that
That
is
was
awesome.
really great. That was
You trapped me in
Not
the
bad for last
anals,
minute.
so I was unhappy about that.
I know. I did try to work with that as an idea. I was like, oh, he's in the anals. He's in the.
You really
I was
chode
like,
me.
No.
You can't help
man.
yourself. How do you think of those?
I don't know.
Oh my god.
It's impressive. I think puns are impressive.
I think
'Cause
he
I
thinks
just don't
he's
think
got a
that way.
dad joke brain, but it's like Mike, so it's kind of warped.
It's like a dirty dad joke. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a
exactly.
drunk
you
old
ain't seen the
joke.
end of his jokes.
Yeah.
Man.
Should we pause for Mike, who just inexplicably left the recording?
Yeah, we can.
He just got up, listener. He's gone. He just left the room.
He has a sign that just says lake on the wall.
Yeah,
There's another one that says beach.
he's a big fan of limnology and bodies of water. I think
Yeah.
fresh water, baby.
What's that word? Liminology? What'd you say?
Limnology. It's the study of fresh water.
Oh, there we go.
Freshwater,
Okay.
like biology and science. The only reason I know that is because my wife's she actually
right.
studied
There we
limnology.
go.
I wouldn't have
Yeah.
known what that word was.
Yeah, I mean, we could wait. This could just be outtakes. Or not, or.
It's
Outtakes. That's how you say outtakes in Italian.
is it?
See, in Spanish.
I
you
like
say,
your Spanish voice.
outtako. Esto es un outtako.
There's my new favorite thing. It's on Instagram. Like I get lost in reels sometimes when I just
Yeah.
want to turn off my brain. So there's a guy who plays VR as a cat. It's like a game where you're a cat, and he's just like crawling around as a cat. And in the game, there's a kind of cartoonish like CGI grandma, and he's like being a cat, but he's Spanish. Like I don't know if he's in Mexico or I think he's
Like
sounds
Puss in
like
Boots.
well, he's just like this Spanish dude speaking Espanol as a cat, and like he's just always yelling and gesturing. Like really, I'll send it to you because it just makes me so happy. He's always like
Yeah.
abuela, abuela, and he's like talking about like how she's not feeding him and stuff. He really, it's my favorite thing.
I think Puss in Boots is actually one of my favorite animated characters.
No, I haven't seen.
Now I need to see it.
No.
There's like a trilogy. There's
Mike,
like
we
a Puss in
paused
Boots-
since you
Well,
you
at
wandered
least-
off.
At least
Oh.
a sequel.
Sorry. Yeah. My
Well, we didn't pause. We just filled the
Okay.
air with.
got it. Sorry. I was going to signal and I was like, I'm just going to step out.